While indigenous Kentuckians had been constructing earthen mounds for hundreds of years before, during a period from 200 BCE to 500 CE, a widespread intensification of the building of burial mounds and other earthworks is present in the archaeological record. As a part of this trend, new styles of decorated pottery came into use, and people participated in long-distance exchange networks of ritual objects, often made from exotic materials like copper, mica, marine shell, and more. These cultural trends are characterized as the Middle Woodland period. In this video, we explore the Middle Woodland archaeology of Kentucky and replicate a Copena projectile point, one of the styles of stone tool made during this period. To begin my replica of a Middle Woodland Copena point, I select a flat section of Fort Painchurch from southern Kentucky, a region where the style of projectile point is particularly common. These bifaces are lanceolate, exhibiting a slightly constricting haft area and a flared base. Middle Woodland people continued to use styles of stem points like Adena and Kramer from the early Woodland period. These were eventually replaced by styles like Copena, corner notch projectile points like Snyder's and Mancur, and towards the end of the Middle Woodland, small expanding stem points like Low and Steuben points became a common technology. All of these projectile point styles would have been used to tip at ladle or spear thrower darts for hunting. My flintknapping at this stage is focusing on removing large flakes, which establish a regular cross-section and edge across the piece, and begins to thin this piece of chert. The transition from the early Woodland period to the Middle Woodland period isn't marked by abrupt changes, but more so a continuation and intensification of trends which started during the early Woodland. Adena cultural practices associated with mound building continued well into the Middle Woodland period in Kentucky. In surrounding regions like Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois, Adena is replaced by another cultural manifestation which archaeologists term Hopewell, or the Hopewell interaction sphere. Hopewell is a set of ritual practices or cultural trends represented in the archaeological record by styles of earthen mounds, burial practices, geometric earthworks, and the exchange of exotic materials and stylized objects. While some people in Kentucky did participate in some of these practices, this participation was limited in its intensity compared to centers of Hopewell activity elsewhere. Evidence for settlement practices during the Middle Woodland period show that people increasingly settled into floodplains. People lived in small groups or collections of families which could be described as hamlets, in square or rectangular houses based on post molds excavated by archaeologists. In central Kentucky, these settlements were located separate from earthworks and mounds, whereas in western Kentucky, people sometimes used the same spaces as habitation sites as where they built their mounds. Middle Woodland people continued to focus on hunting and gathering for a large part of their diets, but also supplemented it with the horticulture of eastern agricultural complex crops which developed fully during the early Woodland period. These included sunflower, squash, chenopodium, goosefoot, and more. As the piece of chert I'm working has become a regularized biface after many flake removals, my focus becomes on thinning the piece rather than just shaping it. Since this stone is wider than what I need for a Copena point, I have extra material to work with. Middle Woodland people made and used a variety of stone tools, not just bifacial projectile points. Bladelets struck from specialized, prepared cores are a unique technology from this time period. Microware has shown that these bladelets were used for a wide variety of tasks, ranging from everyday cutting activities to craft item production. These tools are far more common in the Ohio archaeological record, where Hopewell activities were far more evident. Bladelets made out of brightly colored Vanport chert, also known as Flint Ridge chert from Ohio, can be found at Kentucky sites, but are almost exclusively found as burial goods. Otherwise, Middle Woodland stone tool technology is similar to early Woodland technology, including flake tools, scrapers, celt-style axes, and more. Pottery was an important technology for Middle Woodland peoples to cook and store food. Conchoidal, barrel-shaped and flower pot-shaped jar designs from the beginning of the Middle Woodland transitioned to subconchoidal and subglobular vessels later on. Cord marking or wrapping, dowel impressions, and more mark the surfaces of earlier vessels, while cord marking becomes the most common decoration throughout time, although plain vessels were common throughout this time period. Ritual objects and burial goods are a hallmark of the Middle Woodland period. Groundstone smoking pipes, gorgets, and objects made from barite and galena can be found in the archaeological record of this time. Engraved stone tablets with iconography or plain examples have been found in burial contexts. Copper jewelry and cutouts, mica, and marine shell in various forms were exchanged from very distant regions. Other objects include items made from canal coal, modified canid and feline mandibles, bone combs, and more. As I start to reach my desired thinness, I focus on the outline of the preform I'm flintknapping into a Copena point. Flake removals become more controlled as the form becomes more lanceolate and the point starts to develop. Middle Woodland mounds usually contained burials, and were typically earthen constructions with a circular or ovicular shape. However, a single mound was not usually just the tomb of a single person, but contained several individuals. Mounds were often built in multiple phases, sometimes with each phase having a burial of its own and adding to the mound's height. Most Middle Woodland mounds were built during the beginning of the period, and it became a less important practice as time went on. Later examples of mounds incorporated stone into the burial crypts and constructions, sometimes with the entire mound made from piled rocks. Middle Woodland people constructed geometric earthworks, and not just burial mounds. Adena earthworks from the earlier part of the period were built as large oval or circular ditched enclosures, such as the Mount Horeb earthwork in Fayette County. Earthworks were also built which don't conform to a particular shape, such as the Obiam's Fort earthwork in Fulton County, which has a shape reminiscent of a giant tuning fork. These larger enclosures likely served as community aggregation centers for widespread, dispersed communities to perform rituals at and interact with groups from across the region. Gatherings in these spaces served to reinforce social ties between dispersed communities. In general, western and southern Kentucky lacked the larger geometric earthworks found in more central regions of the state. Although burial mounds, like Watkins Mound in Logan County, were still made and used by Middle Woodland people in this region. The Watkins Mound site is a set of two Middle Woodland period mounds in Logan County. These mounds are both ovicular, with only the larger of the two mounds, Mound A, having been excavated. This mound contained 48 burials, 19 of which were placed in stone-lined graves. Some of the burial crypts were more elaborate than others, which may indicate a degree of social differentiation among the people buried. Nearly equal proportions of the individuals buried were identified as either male or female. Burials are arranged in a number of orientations and placements within the mound. Both domestic and ritual objects were present in 27 of the burials, including multiple late Middle Woodland expanding stem points, one Copena point, a cache of 23 triangular bifaces, 36 bladelets, 3 ceramic elbow pipes, 2 mica scraps, 5 rectangular gorgets, an incised vessel with tetrapodal supports were among artifacts recovered in the mound. Other artifacts from the site included bone beads, awls, and a pin, shell, both a marine and turtle in origin, blade cores for making bladelets, a greenstone celt, and a wolf mandible. As I've been finishing this Copena projectile point, I've utilized a method known as pressure flaking to press off small, refined flakes with an antler tool to both shape and sharpen it. The outline is fairly simple to achieve with this technique, as I create a flared haft area and a pointed tip. Middle Woodland people who created points like this left a unique hallmark on the archaeological record. The mounds and large earthworks that they created altered the Kentucky landscape, as a number of these constructions can still be seen and visited today. Exotic goods and ritual objects show that indigenous Kentuckians were participating in exchange networks that stretched across eastern North America and were connected to specific cultural and religious ideas. As I remove the final sharpening flakes from this Copena point, I can't help but appreciate the unique chapter the Middle Woodland period represents in Kentucky archaeology.